kids, adults, fans of all ages. This podcast episode contains spoilers for various Thor arcs from the comics, although we don't spoil them heavy, but we do give details from them. We're careful not to spoil them heavy because we think it's great if you go back and read those. And we're giving you a lot of theories for Thor Love and Thunder. And if any of those are right, number one, we told you. Number two, they might be spoilers, so take those with a grain of salt, but hopefully they won't be. But hopefully we are also right. All aboard the goat boat, folks, get aboard. Tooth Gnasher is here, Tooth Grinder is here, and today we will diving into the Thor Love and Thunder trailer, priming you for what to expect as we enter, as we fly deeper into cosmic Marvel territory, cosmic God territory, and of course we'll be talking about some of those cosmic characters that are referenced in the trailer. First off, what did you think of the trailer before we dive into the kind of some of the details of the stuff that we see and therein?
I love this trailer. I
thought it was great.
I'm like a Thor Ragnarok super stan. That to me is like
yes,
one of the best recontextualizing of a character ever. One of the best outrageous third sequel in a franchise that just somehow like completely reinvigorates the character. I love how much this kind of leans into the van art of it all. Like it's, you know, the dulcet tones of like orchestral Sweet Child of Mine are in the background, and he's wearing his strongest Avenger, trucker cap while he's exercising with Sutur's chains. Like the vibes are immaculate.
Let's go through it. So we open with Thor meditating, and you can see like two humanoid creatures like in profile and shadow, like walking up to his little meditation tree. Korg is there with a bunch of locals. Now, this is probably the planet, the movie version of the planet Indigar, which is the planet that we open on in Thor God of Thunder, Jason Aaron's opening to this arc in the comics. They are a planet of really like almost innocent aliens who worship these gods, the Sky Lords. And I don't know how Thor comes here or why Korg is with him, but it feels like that's what this is. This is like an opening of God of Thunder.
And it seems like in a moment in the trailer that kind of comes up quite quickly, he throws his duster off on this planet and he seems to be with the Guardians, and it looks like it's the same planet. So I think this is going to be...
I agree.
They probably arrive with the Guardians, or he goes there with the Guardians and Korg meets him there. And this trailer hints to me that the Guardians will be the opening part of this movie.
I agree. I completely agree with you. I think it's going to be 5 minutes or so, and then we leave the Guardians. Something is going to happen. Thor's going to find something, probably, murdered gods, right? Mm-hmm. And then he's going to say, "I've got to go back to New Asgard. I've got to go back to Earth to, check in there. I've been away for however long." So that scene you were talking about. So I think we're probably still on Indigar. You see he's fighting with the Guardians. There's all sorts of like laser shots coming in. So they're not fighting Gore at this point in time.
I think they're kind of like a...
Who do you think they're fighting? Who do you think they're fighting?
I think they're kind of like a Heroes for Hire, like cosmic Ghostbusters. I think they're less...
A-team in space kind of like thing.
I think that Thor's presence has probably made them a little less criminally inclined, and also post the kind of carnage and then second chance of Endgame, I think that the Guardians will kind of be going around. And I think that we will hear the term Asgardians of the Galaxy, which was kind of the comic book joke of Thor joining them. And I think like we will probably see him and them in a montage, probably to some hair metal, and they're like kind of helping different people. Thor is going from, as they call it in the trailer.
He went from dead bod to god bod.
And he's doing his training. I think we'll see some kind of montage, and it will end with them on this planet that could be Indigar, and that will kind of be where the meat of the story actually begins. is my feeling.
Should add that during those opening Indigar scenes when Thor throws off his jacket, he's wearing like the Eric Masterson Thor, like
he's Thunderstrike,
or what certainly appears to be the Thunderstrike outfit. And we mentioned him before. Eric Thunderstrike is Eric Masterson, who was like an architect, a New York based architect. He was also blonde, also very tall, also buff.
Yeah.
Who it turned out was worthy of lifting Mjolnir, and so wielded the power of Thor for a certain part of time during Roger Stern's run on the Avengers. And it's, man, I'd mentioned this before, but every issue is really funny of the Avengers during this time, because it's like there's always that thought bubble where, Roger Stern needs to remind the audience, like, somebody will say, "Oh, Thor, remember that time back on Asgard?" And then there'll be this little thought bubble where Thunderstrike is like, "They all think I'm Thor, but really I'm Eric Masterson, a mild-mannered architect."
Yeah. And like, and he is his first debuts was like Thunderstrike in Thor 391, which was in 1988. But I will say, the character design, it's Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz, the artist. Yeah. And Ron Frenz's character design is so extremely 90s. Like, he was so ahead
very,
of the curve.
Very 90s.
And they are really leaning into that here. Like, something I think is really interesting that I don't even think we've talked about, because we've talked about Thor, God of Thunder a lot. I was rereading it, and we know that Gorr the God Butcher is a big part of that. But something that's really interesting in that story that I feel like comes across in this trailer in a kind of unexpected way. In that story, we learn that there's 3 different versions of Thor, and they're all fighting Gorr the God Butcher in their own timeline kind of thing, right?
King Thor, regular Thor, and then the young, impetuous Thor.
And something I think is really interesting is that in these trailers, we have seen different versions of Thor. Now, it's all the same timeline, but we are seeing
that too as well.
We are seeing an Eric Masterson style Thor. We see him in his battle armor, which we get to see his mask for the first time. We're also seeing Jane as Thor. And I hope that we'll probably see like a Beta Ray Bill, who's a cosmic alien who held Mjolnir. I think that there's something to this notion of, even in this trailer, that Korg's voiceover, he says,
"And after all that, he reclaimed his title as the one and only Thor." Oh, spoke too soon.
So I think that while we're not going to see necessarily 3 Odin sons, I think that this is all about the notion of like, who is Thor, and different versions of Thor, whether it's Jane, whether it's maybe Valkyrie, maybe it's Beta Ray Bill, maybe it's this Eric Masterson iteration. I think the notion of many different Thors and the idea of who Thor is and what Thor is going to really play into this movie in a way that kind of leans into that.
Now, you mentioned the Thor armor. The Thor armor from the comics, I forget, I want to say it's like 400 or 3 something.
Yeah, let me find it.
So
armor.
The Thor battle armor, Thor had to wear that, and it is very 90s.
378, very impressive.
Thor 378. So he had to wear that because Hela had like cursed him, and his bones became like super brittle. Like, you could just like hit him, and then he'd break his bones, and so he was like always in pain. So he had to have this armor forged so that he could hold that in. It'd be interesting to see if that is part of it. My thought is that Thor is like has to go to some I wonder why he forges it, but it'll be interesting to see. I wonder if it's like he has to go to some kind of ceremony, some like special, because he has to go back to New Asgard, and there is a scene in there where it seems like they're at either a museum opening or some kind of ceremony with a bunch of other humans around, and I wonder, and he's wearing the armor, so I wonder if it's like somewhat ceremonial.
So I think this is out there, right? I don't know if it's going to be true, but one thing we know about the MCU is they love to tie something back to Tony Stark.
Yeah,
right? They love that guy. Robert Downey Jr., the MCU wouldn't exist without him. Tony Stark, MCU wouldn't exist without him. In the comics, Thor gets the idea to build the armor because Tony makes him like a cast when his arm breaks, and the battle armor is kind of inspired by / similar to, and I wonder if Thor has the hat that says strongest Avenger, and his dream was to like be taken seriously by Tony, and for Tony to see him as this kind of important part of the team. I wonder if part of his journey will be finding that Tony made him a prototype armor. I feel like that I would love it to be something more cosmic, but I feel like there's the fact that Tony is connected to it in the comics and the MCU loves Tony and everyone's kind of had their Tony journey. I wouldn't be surprised if at least part of it is connected back to, or Tony was the one who found it. And we also see what looks like a kind of like dead star. So I do wonder if we'll maybe go back to the heart of the star where he forged Stormbreaker at some point as well. I think those two kind of big bits.
So after that kind of opening battle scene with the Guardians, we go to New Asgard, and it's clear New Asgard is doing great. It's doing fucking great.
Killing
There's a
it.
golf course. There's 3 like Viking cruise line cruise ships that are docked there, and it's very clear that like New Asgard is, for whatever else has been going on, of course, that the people have been through some real tragedies in recent MCU movies, but now, despite that being the case, they are clearly making a lot of money from tourism
King
right
Valkyrie's
now.
killing it.
Yeah, absolutely killing it. We get that clip that you mentioned with Thor with the strongest Avenger like knockoff hat training with the chains. Now, here's the thing that's out there. You mentioned that maybe that's Surtur. There's like an internet rumor going out there that it could be a Watcher. Like that's a.
Definitely I assume that because of Marvel and Easter eggs, it's probably Surtur's chains. But I do think that the dead body that we see does not look like him, and it has a very different shaped face, and that would be really interesting if it was a Watcher. There's a lot of them. There can be a Watcher. We can lose a few. Yeah,
we can lose it. There are many Watchers. I wonder if, do you think that person, because when I see like chains and torture, I think Gore's victims. I wonder if it's like, Thor found this and
maybe
this
that's
is one
what
of
inspires
Gore's
him.
early victims. Yeah, and it either inspires him or he later realizes, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah, I think that's
the Gore's been at this a while.
I think you're right. I think maybe the moment that we saw in the first trailer that was so impactful, that was taken from Asad Ribic's art directly, maybe that's the moment when Thor starts putting it together, that this isn't a one-off thing. But in the moment, that's more of like a funny, he's just training, and there's skeletons, because, in the beginning of Ragnarok, he's just chilling with a skeleton. Like, that's just what it is. And then he starts putting that together. I think that's really clever.
And now, if that is a Watcher, it also calls, just the fact that we're dealing with a movie where Jane Foster is Thor, it calls to mind Original Sin, which I think we've mentioned before, which is the whodunit kind of Marvel Comics arc from 5 or 6 years back, where the Watcher is murdered and no one knows who done it. I'm not going to spoil who done it, but at the end of that arc, there is another mystery in which something is whispered into Thor's ear, and all of a sudden that whatever that is, that secret, it makes Thor unworthy, and he can't hold Mjolnir anymore, and that's essentially how Jane comes into possession of it. So that could be interesting to see. Then we have a scene of Jane riding either Valkyrie's horse, or maybe she gets one now. Maybe she has her own Valkyrie horse now. Which I think in the comics, was it called Mr. Horse? I forget. And then she crashes through the ceiling of a temple on some world somewhere. And you have a theory on what this world could possibly be. And then in that kind of like secret chamber, we see statues of several cosmic deities. We see a Watcher, probably Uatu. We could guess it's Uatu the Watcher. We see the three-faced, living tribunal. We see the Mistress Death, who is, of course, Thanos' girlfriend.
Yeah, that's a big, like, to see Death in the MCU thing. That one is like, that's huge for fans of the Jim Starlin Thanos stuff, and also just like for Thanos fans in general. That's the major change that they made in the Infinity War saga. And
then Infinity on the end, and then either Eon or Eternity next to Infinity.
Yeah.
Now, if it's Eternity, it makes sense because Eternity and Infinity are brother and sister. And if it's Eon, it kind of makes sense because Eon is a very ancient cosmic deity who is directly related to Quasar and the quantum bands
created
and
the quantum
our
bands,
current Miss Marvel.
So that would make sense to have it be Eon or Epoch. Both of them have this kind of like, Epoch is his daughter, and he created the quantum bands, and Epoch was the one who took over and was able to bestow it upon the protectors of the universe. So it will be this is a very interesting collection of characters.
Let's discuss these cosmic deities. So we've been dealing a lot with whether it's Moon Knight, previous Thor films. We've been dealing a lot with Marvel gods, Marvel deities. Cosmic deities are like the gods of the gods, kind of. So you have Uatu, who's not really a god, who's just kind of like a cosmic peeper whose job
cosmic
it is
voyeur.
to cosmic voyeur whose job is to like watch everything that happens in their particular realm of the galaxy and the universe. The Living Tribunal, very interesting cosmic deity. It basically judges.
Yeah, he's a judge. He's a judgy
everybody.
Guy. Just be judging.
Yeah,
judging at all times.
He's judging, whether something is in balance or not, and should be part of the cosmos.
That to me seems like a really interesting inclusion, because at the end of everyone's favorite Marvel movie, Eternals, the Arishem, the Celestials, they kind of like warned the humans, they warned the Eternals that judgment was coming, that somebody cosmic was coming to judge Earth to see whether or not it was worth them killing a Celestial and saving humanity. I think that the Living Tribunal would be a very choice option for that. There's also the notion that could be a way of introducing like a Galactus or something like that as basically a punishment or a judgment on humans. But yeah, the fact that these characters are here it feels like more than an Easter egg. Yeah.
Mistress Death,
iconic,
of course, was iconic. And if you think back to our original Avengers movie, the stinger of that is the reveal that Thanos is behind all of this, and Thanos's lackey says, to the humans, they are powerful, but
to challenge them is to court death.
The court death line was our signal that, oh shit, this is Thanos, because in the comics, everything Thanos does, he does because he has been brutally friend-zoned by death. And he's just trying to impress her all the time.
Yeah, he wants to impress her, and how better to impress death than to kill half of the living creatures.
Yes.
That's the thing. In the comics, this is not like it's not like a weird eco-fascist, like that everyone will survive if we kill half of the world. No. This is no like, oh, couldn't he just use the reality gem to make some more potatoes? No, he just did it because he loves death. He loves death. He's going to kill a lot of people, so death will be impressed. Alas, she is rarely ever impressed.
Yeah, she's rarely ever. And then finally, either Eon or Eternity and Infinity. Eternity and Infinity are the easiest. They're brother and sister, and they're just basically like the manifestations of different kinds of infinity, right? Eternity is basically like everything in the universe.
Yeah, like time,
as a
space,
person.
matter, energy, like everything. And it's really, these are really like abstract concepts.
It's incredibly abstract. And don't worry if it's weird, folks, because believe me, it is weird. And when they appear in the comics, it's always like a drizzle of them, because if you think too hard about it, you're like, this is super weird.
Yeah, this is more like, this is that stuff where comics can be so fantastical, and where a lot of this stuff is not really codified in like canon or anything. It's more just like, these are weird things that these creators sprinkled in to make writing these comics every single week more exciting for them, more strange, more experimental. And so a lot of times when we're talking about this stuff, we're talking about characters who have appeared in a few things, or whose canon kind of stretches and changes and is absolutely abstract. And and in the comics, like, Infinity is really interesting, but Infinity has like an outrageously sick character design, and it's really weird. But in some versions, like the quantum bands actually like tap into infinity. So there's kind of all these different, it feels like it's not a coincidence that this trailer has this really big cinematic shot of these cosmic entities, which is, I believe, what they, in the comics, they usually call them cosmic beings, but I think that the Collector at some point calls them cosmic entities in the MCU, so it's kind of the Infinity Gems versus Infinity Stones. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing these cosmic entities in a movie that is essentially going to come out a month after Miss Marvel debuts.
I agree with you.
And we know that with just from the trailers and what we've seen so far of the powers that we've discussed before, that she has these kind of gauntlets that seem like they could be related to or inspired by the quantum bands. And in the trailer, she even says,
What does it feel like?
Cosmic. So, you know, this notion of the Marvel cosmic is becoming more and more interesting. The question is, in the context of seeing this in the Thor trailer and knowing that Gorr the God Butcher, who we meet for the first time in this trailer and is terrifying, are the statues of these deities because they're dead? Has Gorr killed them? Are these deities who existed so long ago that other gods now worship them? Like, that's what I find really interesting.
Well, I found myself wondering, like, where this place that Jane finds herself is. Because, you had texted us that maybe it's Cronux, which is this, like, hidden realm beyond space, beyond time, that is like it's basically like the temple of the origin of like the universe.
And it's in Thor, God of Thunder, our favorite, referring to arc, Jason Aaron and Asad Ribic. And it plays a major part in that. But that would be like, if that's what this is, it would be an expansion and different version. Because in there, the generic kind of time gods live there and they get killed by Gorr. And then he uses their blood to travel to a different timeline to build this weapon, the God Bomb, right?
The God Bomb!
So in that version, I think if this was the MCU adapting that, and maybe that's why Jane is there, then it could be something along the lines of kind of like a situation where it's like the time gods maybe worshipped the cosmic deities, and that's why they're there.
I like that.
Something like that. So, so we're like, Taika's done a great job of establishing through production design the existence of characters that he obviously really cares about. So, like in Thor Ragnarok, on the planet that was essentially like the kind of World War Hulk like planet, like the Sakaar. On that planet, there was this huge kind of totem, and one of the faces that was translated there that had been like kind of sculpted was Beta Ray Bill. So in that way, I really like the notion that you can kind of introduce these characters into existence by being like other people worship them. And then whether or not we get to truly explore who they are. I mean, I think that death being here is a big deal because I am truly a believer that they're going to resurrect Thanos. And if they do it, death being a part of it, death resurrecting him potentially, I think it just makes so much sense, especially with Adam Warlock about to appear. This is going to be the most cosmic phase of the MCU.
I agree with you on that. Okay, so then we get some battle scene on the streets of New Asgard. We get to see Jane and Thor back together. Very interesting note here. She's like, how long's it been? And clearly, like, Thor has been out in space, like, doing stuff for years. She's like, it's been like something like 3 years. And he's like, no, it's been 8.5. 5-year difference.
Was Jane
suggesting
blipped?
Jane was blipped, right? She had to have been. Right? That's the only way it makes sense, right? Okay, so I agree with that. Then we get the scene of what is either Olympus or like Omnipotent City from Jason Aaron's run on Thor. Omnipotent City is this like meeting place in the cosmos where like all the gods like come and hang out and they talk about stuff that's happening.
And we do see a bit later on in the final like kind of stinger, which has like a great comedic moment that we'll get to, we do see there that it looks like there are seats for multiple different gods. Whether or not that's gods from different spaces, or if it's just the pantheon of Greek gods, it's interesting to kind of know. I think you could really be onto something there. Yeah.
Now, this is a staple of Thor comics throughout the years. This like council of godheads, when all the different gods from all the different world cultures get together, talk about shit. I would imagine if there was like a mad alien butcher running around with a necro sword killing gods all through the timeline, that the gods would need to get together and talk it out. So that's probably what that is. You know,
I actually, you know what I think as well? Like, so we kind of see that the Zeus, at least in this, is a kind of a comedic figure, which is very realistic to the mythology. But also, like, we saw a Empire magazine, I believe, released an image of Jane Foster, Valkyrie, and a woman who looked like Bast sitting in front. I wonder if they go to the gods, to the Infinite Embassy, to the omnipotent space, and in the hopes of finding that serious council. And I wonder if they're too bacchanal and too kind of like lax, and they want to drink
unserious, right? Yeah.
And I wonder if we see my gut says Zeus is not long for this world. I think that there is going to be a god massacre, and I wonder if Jane and Valkyrie and Bast have to create their own more serious, we're going to do something about it version.
Yeah, I think however they arrive there on the on the goat boat, it's not exactly planned because they crash through like the ceiling of it. Yeah, I think you're right. Zeus is at the end fight where we see Valkyrie, Jane, and Thor fighting Gore. Valkyrie is like wielding what look like Zeus's lightning, his lightning spear, and his like lightning weaponry. The only thing that I can draw from that is Zeus.
He bites.
Is dead.
Yeah,
Zeus is God because he's. I can't imagine Zeus being the type of guy who'd be like, "Yeah, go ahead, take my spear.
It's all
cool. Have fun with that."
Don't worry about it. So something that we haven't really talked about, but like we do get is, so in all the trailers and the promo images, we'd said, like, you kept bringing up, this is a villain who doesn't appear in the trailers, but this is a very gore-heavy trailer.
All gods will die.
Yes.
So what did you think when you saw him?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved the design. I loved that you could see his face. Maybe that is like from the early days of Gore, and that he evolves into this more like demonic thing. But I thought it was really chilling. We got a view of the Necro Sword, which was amazing. For those of you who maybe haven't heard us talk about this before, so the Necro Sword is Gore's weapon. It is, in Marvel canon, like the original symbiote. Like Venom came from this. Like this is the thing that created Venom, that created the creatures that would go on to become Carnage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought he looked super scary.
He looked so scary and like really gross. I think that
really gross, which I like.
Something that people often say about Marvel movies, and have said pretty much since the beginning, is it's hard to make like a great Marvel villain. And obviously, I think Thanos is the contradiction to that kind of proves the rule.
Villain.
Like I think people, but generally, like I like the cartooniness of a lot of the villains, like Ultron, and I even like Iron Man too. I love. Those are I'm not a Whiplash hater, but like this is a very different vibe. Like, and Christian Bale is playing it Shakespearean. Like they have a shot of him looking at the camera saying like all gods must die, and it's like chilling. And something that I think is really cool that I cannot wait to see how this translates. It feels so comic booky. Is it looks like whenever Gore kills a planet or he has a space that is entirely grayscale and everything there is black and white. And that just looks so cool. And depending on when we see him fighting other people, sometimes they are also black and white, or sometimes they are in color and he is in black and white. I'm really excited to see how that kind of comes across. And also something, and I know, I'm sorry, it's always going back to the Eternals, but
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it has to happen.
I honestly love
this
that.
movie came back. I'm sorry, it is in the MCU, guys. I'm sorry, it is likely that it could play a part. But something that when I was reading up on All Black, the Necrosword, the first symbiote, that was actually created by Null, another character that we've talked about, who's like been very big in Marvel in the last couple of years.
Yes.
But they tempered the sword using like the power that came off of a dying Celestial.
Right.
So I just think that there is a version where the death of the Celestial at the end of Eternals could have been how Gore suddenly has this sword. You know,
I have a similar theory.
I love to hear it.
Kind of, sort of. So at the end of this trailer, we see this battle taking place on this like dead, desolate moon, right? That's either Cronux or some other place where, in the comics, as you mentioned, like Gore goes and enslaves a bunch of gods to build this god bomb, which he's then going to set off and it's going to kill all the gods. We see in the midst of this fight, like Gore shove the Necrosword down into the surface of this moon. I think the moon could be the god bomb.
Oh,
I think it's the moon.
That is so sick. I love that.
I think it's. Listen, this feels like another thing where I am like probably going to be wrong, but I do wonder if I think the moon could be the god bomb. I think it's.
I love that because if you think about it as well, just on like a basic scientific level, and the number one way to decimate like a solar system and specifically a planet is to fuck with the moon. Let alone if you actually make it into a legitimate weapon. That also could be really interesting because I think Uatu lives on the moon or a moon at some point. So maybe there is something there connected to like the death of a Watcher and the moon. I mean, this is just so exciting. Like how often do we get a trailer that has this much stuff that you can just break it down? Like it's so fun. And that's before like there's so much action in this trailer and so many fun nods and moments that you don't even really like. We haven't even really touched on just how good the character beats are. Like Thor seeing Jane, and also like it could be a misdirect, but the trailer, and one of the last things that we see in the trailer is Gore says, he's looking really gross and he's like got black stuff like coming out of his mouth and he's like,
You are not like the other gods of kill. You have something worth fighting for.
And we see what looks like Jane and Thor connecting like pinky fingers.
Yeah, oh man, that actually like that I felt a swell in my heart when I saw that.
I would love to see this have a romantic element to it, or have that kind of, at least the notion of like love being this really important part in a lot of comics. Love does save the day. Like that's a big part of Young Avengers. Like that can happen, and Taika's the kind of person who I think, especially after watching like Our Flag Means Death, and I think that he's the kind of person who isn't afraid to bring that element to these stories, and I think that Jane and Thor is a pairing that a lot of Marvel fans have really loved for a really long time. So it could be cool to see it go in that direction. But who knows? Maybe they're just holding fingers because they're friends, and Jane and Valkyrie will be gay, or maybe it'll be a throuple. Who knows? Taika's a wild man. I believe in him.
Man. I gotta say, I'm a little. I don't want to put this bad juju out there, but and there's gonna be a lot of gods that die. I'm a little worried about Valkyrie surviving this movie, a tiny bit.
I feel your fear, and you know what I have to say. I made shock horror before the Eternals came out. I made a ranking of the Eternals of who was going to survive, right? And I was mostly absolutely wrong. And that movie changed the amount of trust that I put into these movies to keep characters alive, especially queer characters and people of color. I hope that Valkyrie does survive because she's one of my all-time fave characters. I was actually going to wear my Valkyrie t-shirt, but it's like a kid's t-shirt and it doesn't really fit me. It's really uncomfortable. I need to turn it into like a cool jacket patch. They made the romance between Thor and Jane seem so cute here that I am worried that will be the tragic romance. Because of the nature of how Jane gets her powers in the comics, and the cancer storyline.
I didn't want to bring that into it, but I agree with you that part of it is
jinxed
also
us.
troubling. Also, the fact that she's riding the Valkyrie horse, which shouldn't happen if it is Valkyrie's horse. So there's a lot of stuff there that I'm concerned about. I hope it's fine.
I want them all to survive. Don't hurt my children, my good
Yeah.
gay Marvel children. I'm sorry.
I agree.